Hi, my name is Fiona Hyslop. I'm MSP for West Lothian, and I'm here tonight to tell you about my perspective about why Scotland needs to be independent. I think we have the economic strength to be independent. I think we can be independent, and I think we should be independent because the type of society that I want to see, a fair and just society, requires the powers that can only come with independence. And I think we must be independent because this isn't a choice anymore about independence and the status quo. You've got to look at the Westminster government and say, can you imagine what it's going to be like in the future? Should we stay with Westminster? Should, for example, another Conservative government get elected, and what that can look like? But it's possible. In terms of what we can do, absolutely possible. Last night I was down in London, it was Commonwealth Day, I was representing the Scottish Government at an event with all the different countries from the Commonwealth. And this guy said to me, we're part of the Westminster establishment. He says, I can't understand why you want to be independent. And I said, look at those 54 different nations that were in that room. All of them have become independent from the Westminster government. And I said to him, not what you asked them, did any one of them want to go back to being run by Westminster, having had the freedoms that they've had? And last week I was in Finland. Finland, a country of 5.4 million people, same size as Scotland. But that's a country where we don't have the big divide that we have in our society between the rich and the poor. They organise themselves in a way that's egalitarian, that has fairness, has justice. And it also is a country that doesn't have oil and gas. They import all their oil and gas, but they actually, in terms of their economic strength, they have great companies and they're constantly innovating and making changes. So in terms of the world, there are huge numbers of countries that over the recent decades and indeed the last century have become independent. I meet them all the time as a government minister, and there's a great excitement and interest in the world about what's happening here. Because people are saying there's an opportunity to shape a country, to think about what would a new democracy, a progressive democracy in the northwest of Europe look like? If you could invent the country that you wanted, if you could see the things that you want, not just for yourself, but also for your children and your grandchildren, what would it look like? And I believe that this is a country that is one of the foundations of which would be social justice. And I believe that we would have a country that wouldn't have the bedroom tax. I believe that we would be a country that would care for each other and make sure we did have social provision for everyone. And I believe that we are a country of people with talent and ability and capability to make sure that we have the type of economy that we need for the future. And that's the hope that's there. Because if we don't think about the future, we don't think about what we can be, then we're stuck with the same. And I think Scotland can be better than this. We have the economic strength. Without oil, we've got the same GDP per head of population as the rest of the UK. With oil and gas, that's a bonus. And another country, if you look at Norway. Norway invested their oil and gas, and now are sitting with £500 billion. They live off the interest. That's a pension fund for the future, for their generation. So we're perfectly capable and able of doing that. And why should we? Because also our politics in this country is one where we believe in the National Health Service, we believe that public services should remain public. We wouldn't have privatisation of Royal Mail, and we would have a society that would reflect the values of this country. And why must we? I'm fed up trying to explain to international visitors that we're run by a government at Westminster that had elected one MP in Scotland. We have more pandas than we have Conservative MPs, yet we're subjected to rules and also laws from Westminster. So I want to make sure that every single time in the future that you vote, you get the government you vote for. It's about democracy, it's about social justice, and it's about the economic future. But finally, it's also about thinking about the type of country that you want. I've got 3 children. I've got a 6-year-old son. It's his first vote. I want him to make up his mind. And I want the people who are here that are undecided to be able to ask questions and think about the future. But we've got to be open-minded. It's your future. You've got a chance to shape your future and your children's future. And that choice will be in your hands. And on the day of September the 18th, you will hold the power of Scotland in your hands. I hope you make the right choice. I hope you vote yes. But I think this country needs you to vote yes. Thank you very much.
Allan.
The movement for Scottish independence is the most exciting thing that I've ever been involved with in my life. It's the most exciting thing that has ever happened to this country. And I didn't even care about politics. I certainly didn't care about Scottish independence when I was young. Growing up in Falkirk, we got to the Monarchy every weekend. Alright, it's not called the Monarchy anymore, but it still calls it the Monarchy. Who calls it Scotland? Exactly. I cared about three things when I was young: films, music, and snogging. The music came from England, the films came from Hollywood, snogging came from nowhere. But, you know, that was what I got for going to the Monarchy. So, as I got older, you do start to think about things. Once you start working and you're paying taxes, you do start to try and think about the way society's put together. And the very first election that I was old enough to vote in was 1997. Tories had been in power for 18 years. Everybody was sick of them. And Labour get in. And we thought, right, this is it, the big change. We've been under the heel with the Tories for long enough, and now Labour are going to sort us out. Well, they did sort us out, but not in the way that we were hoping. Because we had the debacle of Iraq, we had Labour basically leaning towards big business, doing everything they could to help them instead of actually helping working people. We had basically a party that should have been representing the Scottish working class, representing the British elite. And that became pretty obvious pretty quickly. And I marched against the Iraq War down in London. A million people marching. Try and imagine what that was like. It was phenomenal. The energy that was in the air, the positivity. I thought, this is what a revolution looks like. And it was peaceful, and it was beautiful. And what happened? They went ahead and invaded Iraq anyway, at the cost of tens of thousands of lives. So protest didn't work. Voting in a supposedly left-of-centre party to Westminster didn't work. What next? Make poverty history in Edinburgh, 2005? I don't know if anybody remembers that 8 Live Aid. Pink Floyd got back together, which is mainly what I remember for these days. Right, I've got the DVD, watch it once a week at least. So, I marched that day. 20,000 people in Edinburgh determined to make poverty history. They sent the message out to our leaders that we weren't going to accept poverty in the 21st century. Did we make poverty history? No. So that failed. And then we go to the most recent Westminster election. Nick Clegg, he talked a good game. He really did. We thought, well, Labour and the Tories, they're a busted flush, and there's Clegg promising to make everything different. And I believed him. And I voted Lib Dem. I thought, well, there's a chance of getting change in Westminster. This guy's going to change the electoral system. He's distancing himself from the other two parties. He's going to be a breath of fresh air. And I voted Lib Dem only to see them propping up the most brutal Tory government we have ever seen. That are doing things that Thatcher couldn't get away with in our wildest dreams. So there is no choice at Westminster anymore. We've tried everything. Protests, getting out in the streets, 1 million people march in London, didn't change a thing. This is your last chance to change the way that politics is done across the whole of this island. Because if Scotland becomes independent, 51% of the people in this country vote for independence. That's 51% of people who want a change, who want a difference in the way politics is run, who want a country that's run for the people, not for the elites. And when the rest of the country, when England, Wales, Northern Ireland, who've all been told that they're propping us up, that they're subsidising us, that we'll 40 pieces without them, because we're too skint and we're clueless. When they see us making a go at it, protecting the NHS, protecting the welfare state, building council housing, redistributing the wealth, getting rid of nuclear weapons, keeping the NHS public, they'll say, Well, how can we not do that? We've been told that was impossible. And there's 2B Scotland up there, defending all this. And they'll come round and look at the parties that are on offer in Westminster, and they'll demand something better. And Scottish independence will be switched that is flipped, that transforms politics right across the British Isles. Now, we need to think about a no vote, because it's not a choice between change and the status quo, it's a choice between change and change. And if we vote no, essentially, the message that Westminster will hear is, David, you like this. We didn't care. We trust you. We're too daft. We're too wee. You're the ones that know best. And they'll say, Kilman, you're right. And they'll take, hang on, you can't take that, how can we know? That's what you voted for. They'll pretend they're keen and stuff. There you go, there's some tax raising powers. Raise some of your tax. Meanwhile, we're taking away your budget. The block grant that Scotland gets for Westminster, that's worked out as the Barnett formula, £4 billion. They're already talking about scrapping that. So they take £4 billion out of their budget, but they raise taxes. So the SNP are forced to raise taxes or cut public services to cover the £4 billion hole, making them extremely unpopular. So after that work's been done, Labour walk in at the other side of them and occupy the ruins. They've got it all worked out. They're not going to give us nothing that doesn't benefit them. Let's devolve power to local authorities. Sounds great. Local authorities are where Labour, the Lib Dems and the Tories have still got power. They've no power at Holyrood. So what you've got is Westminster parties devolving power to Westminster parties and bypassing Holyrood altogether. They're not going to give us anything that actually gives us mere power and mere wealth. Why would they? If you look at the Edinburgh Agreement, they fought to have Devo Max removed to the ballot paper. Why would they fought to remove that and then give us Devo Max? It doesn't make sense. They're out to beat us. And if we vote no, we're essentially making this one of those great Scottish failures. Oh, we came so close. Allan McLeod's 1978 World Cup bid. I didn't want to be part of another glorious Scottish failure. I want to be part of a glorious Scottish triumph. The open goal was right there. Are we going to kick it out of the bar? No, tap it in. There's other countries that have had armed revolution trying to get what we can achieve with one simple cross in the box. And I hope, like me, that you're prepared to make that decision. Because I didn't want to think about what will happen if we give that power away. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Allan. That was fantastic. I wanted to start by just thanking everybody for coming out tonight. I want to try and talk to you tonight a wee bit more about, from a woman's point of view, what it means for women and referendum, what it means for women voting yes and how to get more engaged. I myself, been a Labour voter most of my life. I've never been a member of any political party, never been involved in anything political. I own a couple of different businesses, I help out with stuff at Yes, and I'm also involved with Women for Indy and Business for Scotland. So we wear many hats, and for many of the women in this room can probably relate to that. We're juggling many balls. Tonight, what I'd like to do is, firstly, talk about what independence actually means. I know that sounds really weird, but what does it actually mean to be independent? Second, I want to demonstrate that Scotland can more than afford to be independent. Thirdly, I want to try and give examples of how we can do that and why we're strong enough. And lastly, I want to talk a wee bit about the consequences of no, because we don't really think about what that no vote means, and I think we really do need to look at what happens in a no vote. What is it you get if you vote no? So, my first of four, in layman's terms, what does voting yes on the 18th September this year mean? It basically means that you're voting for the people of Scotland to make the decisions that most affect Scotland. You're voting for the people that live and work here to make those decisions. Allan touched on it a wee bit, as did Fiona. We have a Tory Westminster government. Just out of a show of hands, anybody willing to say? Anybody voted Tory? Ready? One person.
There we go. So we have, oh, two. Okay, so in the last meeting I was at, there was a room similar size, we had one as well. The vast majority of us don't vote for Tory governments. I certainly don't vote for Tory governments. Voting Labour most of my life, but pretty much I've not got a Labour party that I can vote for. The last elections I voted, 2 elections I voted SNP. I want to see a Labour party that I can actually put my name behind and actually vote behind. Right now, Labour's so far into the Tory camp that it's just not what it should be. It's not representing the people that it needs to be. I want to see the decisions that affect us, that affect every single one of us in this room, taken by the people that actually know what we need, that actually know and care about what Scotland needs, not about what Tory Westminster, what people that maybe went to Eton, not that I'm slagging private schools, but I don't want people that are completely out of touch, don't understand our social and economic needs, making decisions that affect us daily. I also want to talk today about what I know what means. It means, if you actually think about this, that status quo that we're talking about, giving us more powers, that Allan spoke about fantastically there, that it's like dangling that carrot, we're going to get a wee bit more powers. Actually think about that. Why would they do that? Why would they give us more powers? What we're going to get is saying, thank you very much, you had your opportunity to make a change, but you didn't take it. You are happy for us to make all the decisions, take your wealth and give you back what we decide that you need. Just think about that. And even think about, not that I can remember it, but just think back to 1979, the last referendum was. What did we get after that referendum? What happened after that referendum? We got a Tory Margaret Thatcher. I grew up in Hamilton. Personally, my family lost jobs, the loss of the steel industry, the loss of massive economy, massive jobs and wealth in those areas. And if you look at those areas now, like Wishaw, Motherwell, where I grew up, there's very little there. There's no jobs. There's nothing for our youth to do. Where are they meant to be working? What is their careers? What is the future of that? That's what happened back then. So just think about, just for a second, actually stop and think about what happens in that no vote. What happened? Look back into history, and that will give you an idea of what is a possibility of happening. My next point is about Scotland has got what it takes. We always hear that Scotland, we're too wee, we've not got enough money, we're subsidised, you know, we have to kind of pick yous up. Now, these are the words of Mr. David Cameron, I'm sure you've heard of. Scotland can be a successful independent country. And those are the words of Mr. David Cameron. So why are we still thinking that we can't afford to be independent, even when David Cameron is telling, he's coming out publicly and saying Scotland can more than afford it? We need to believe and have the confidence that we can afford this. There is no doubt that Scotland can afford to be an independent country. Scotland would be the 8th richest country in the OECD. Even without the North Sea oil, we kind of touched on this, and oil can be a bit of a bad word, but we don't need the oil. The oil is a massive bonus. We just haven't had any control over it. We've not been able to do what we want with it, and whatever we want. We're just wasting that money. Westminster are taking it back. Even if we didn't have the oil, you hear all this, it's running out, we're going to this, it doesn't, we do not need it, but we have got it, and there's plenty of it left. We perform, we've got fantastic universities, fantastic whisky, we've got a massive whisky economy, exports going out. We have got what it takes, not to mention that we have wind and tidal energy as well that we really should be investing in, but that's not happening yet. We waste money in things. What we've got, we don't need, and what we need, we've not got. Nuclear weapons. I haven't got the exact figures, but it's in the billions that we're wasting in scrap metal and the Clyde. Do you really want that money invested here? We need independent to get rid of Trident. It's not going to happen otherwise. More money is going to be ploughed into that. And I personally don't want nuclear weapons sitting a couple of miles down the road from me. One, I think it's a complete waste of money. I think the money could be spent elsewhere. But also, from a world stage, it just doesn't sit. I don't want war in the world. I don't want to be going to countries and feeling like you're in the UK, you've got nuclear weapons, and having that, threat on other countries. It just doesn't sit right. We don't need them. I want to talk about a wee bit about the Scottish Government and what they currently do at the minute. So things like healthcare are currently devolved, education are devolved. The Scottish Government aren't perfect, sorry, no government's perfect. Most of us don't really like politicians, but they do well with what they've got. So why wouldn't we trust them to have all those powers? They currently have that controlled budget. They're given what Westminster decide to give us, and we give, a certain amount in, which is more than what we get back. And our fantastic ministers are there working out how best to divvy that up. If they were able to control our budgets, their own budgets, and use that, just think what we could actually do. And Allan spoke a wee bit about that in his speech. Just think about that. So take that in. We've got free prescriptions. We look after our old. We look after our young. Yeah. Just think what we can do. Think of the possibilities. And that's one of the main reasons. I've got 2 young kids. I want them to grow up in a country where they've got opportunities, and I want opportunities to depend on your ability, not on your bank balance. I'm going to finish up a wee bit here just because I've got a big long speech here. I don't want to go all, and we'll get a big panel. But I wanted to finish with the can, we should, and we must. We can afford to be independent. Do not believe anybody that tells you that Scotland hasn't got what it takes. We should. Why should we? Because we have the resources. We are more equipped. We have got the wealth, we have got the experience, and we have the fantastic talent to make this country better. And your voices need and deserve to be heard. And we must. Because what is the alternative? What happens if we won't know? We can do this, we should do this, and we must vote yes come the 18th September. Thank you for listening.
Cool. Alright, good evening everyone. I'm Connor and I'm in last year at Larbert High School. Before I talk about why I'm voting yes and the reason I got involved in the campaign, I'd like to start by telling you about myself. During my time at Larbert High, I've discovered that I'm not that good at maths, but I took to languages quite well. So I decided to concentrate on studying them because I like the thought of having a job where I could travel the world and speak to different people from different countries. After my higher exams, Larbert High gave me the opportunity to go and study Chinese at the Academy with other pupils from around Falkirk. And even though it's pretty different from the European languages I've learned, I've been able to get the hang of it. So in the last few months I've decided that I want to help Scottish companies do business with China. And I'm really excited to do this because through the Scottish Confucius Institute I've been offered a scholarship to go to a university in China, Tianjin. So I'll be doing that in September time. In my spare time, I enjoy fencing. When I was 5 years old, I remember watching Lord of the Rings movies, and I sort of thought to myself, I fancy a bit of that. So I continually challenged my dad to fights with a set of plastic golf clubs. And after one too many hits on the knuckles, he decided to send me to fencing training instead. I must have been doing something right eventually, because over the past few years I've been fortunate enough to be picked for the Scotland and Great Britain squad. So you might be sitting there thinking, if you've represented Great Britain, why on earth would you be considering a yes vote? Now, this referendum isn't about the friendships that I've made through fencing. They'll still be there long after independence. This is about what this political union is doing to the country. and I have three main reasons for supporting independence. First of all, the UK has become a much less fair country. We all know that everyone can be wealthy, but can we at least have a country where there's no food banks? In 2011, there was one food bank in the whole of Scotland, and now there are 34. A couple of weeks ago in Glasgow, one of them ran out of supplies completely. And you can't just turn up to a food bank and get a handout. You actually have to apply. A doctor, a police officer has to refer you that you're too poor to go and buy food, so you need to go to these food banks. Oxfam has recently reported that people are handing back the food they get because they don't have enough credit in their electricity meters to go and switch on their cooker to eat their food. Now, last weekend, newspapers reported that the UK government's austerity policy is going to last till at least 2020, and without change, we'll probably see a rise in the number of food banks, and we'll definitely see a rise in the number of people using them. It seems fairly obvious to me that the vast majority of this country's wealth is heading to London and the South East, and even English MPs are noticing this problem. One newspaper reported last Saturday that of the 50 councils in England that are facing the smallest budget cuts, 46 of them are in the south. The 10 least cut are all based in Surrey, which borders southwest London. This is amazing because there's only 10 councils in Surrey. During the past 40 years, the North Sea has produced hundreds of billions of pounds in tax revenue. If you look around, do you honestly believe that this money is to be spent fairly around the country? And do you believe that it will be spent differently anytime soon? My second reason for voting yes, and moving on from what I've just said, is called Look Around You. And when people talk about the economy in this debate, we'll get bombarded with graphs and financial statistics. But I just use my eyes and I can see that there's problems around us. If you've walked along Falkirk High Street recently, you'll have noticed the number of to let signs and the empty skeletons of stores. It's the same in other towns that I've visited, and a lot of the small shops there are suffering. Now, I read in a paper last week that there's 64,000 16 to 24-year-olds who are struggling to find work, and they're actively searching for it. If they all stood in a line, it would reach from Stirling to Glasgow. And we need to build a stronger economy, which is why I think that an independent Scottish Government would be able to have the financial levers at its disposal to help inspire our economy. My third reason for voting yes is that I'd like to keep the NHS going. I have three grandparents, all of them are well over 70, and they've all needed help from my parents, my uncles, my aunts, for the past couple of years due to illnesses. Now, I haven't had much experience with the NHS and the other services that it provides, but watching my mum and dad over the last few years, I know that without the help of the people in these organisations, raising a family and trying to cope with the stress of looking after an ill elderly relative, it would have been so much tougher on them. So it makes sense to me that shouldn't we try and keep that type of support? South of the border, it looks like the NHS is going in a different direction and more of it's going to be privatised. If they remain as part of the UK, eventually there will be a change of government in Holyrood, and I believe that will spell the beginning of the end for the NHS in Scotland as we know it. I think independence is our best chance of keeping a health service that is fair. So those are just some of the reasons why on the 18th of September I'll be marking yes in the ballot paper. But I don't want to just turn up on the day and hope that everyone else was feeling the same as me on that particular day, yeah, go for it. So I decided to get involved with the campaign and I could see if I could help. But, just a second before I get into that, some people doubt whether 16 and 17-year-olds should actually have a vote in this referendum. And I think this attitude's completely wrong. I mean, don't forget, we're going to be the ones that are living with it the longest. And if I'm old enough to join the army, pay taxes, and get married, you can be damn sure that I want a vote in the future in my country. Anyway, about 6 months ago, I started by going to the Yes rally in Edinburgh. The huge crowd, the great atmosphere, and the interesting discussions with everyone there ensured me that I'd made the right decision. And the month after that, I attended the opening of Yes Grangeworth, which was my first local Yes event. The referendum wasn't really discussed by young people at the time, and I went to see if I could get an idea on how to get younger people involved. So, after speaking to a few people at that meeting and getting in contact with Yes Falkirk, I decided to try and get the campaign going at Larbert High School. The first step I took was to simply wear a Yes Larbert badge on my blazer. And naturally this started conversations with people who just became interested in the debate and they wanted to find out why I was voting yes. And I pointed them to a few websites, ones such as Wings Over Scotland, Usenet, Scotland and Business for Scotland as well. And they continually wanted to hear more about it, and eventually they asked if Yes Falkirk could supply them with any materials. And of course this was great. They went away and they did the research, and obviously some of them came back and said, well, I'm still undecided. Some of them came back and were definite yes supporters, which was great. But the best thing about it was that some pupils came back and said, is there any chance I could join the campaign and start working for it? So we all got together, along with Yes Falkirk, and we decided how to really introduce and grow the campaign in the schools. One thing we decided to do was to show both websites to people, both campaigns' official websites, just to see on the impact it would have, whether you could tell if there was a difference between the websites. And this worked pretty well. People were a lot more open to the idea of Yes Scotland. It had a positive message, and it was very accessible, and they were more inclined to read the detail on the website. As some of us were 60ers, we've had plenty of free periods to talk about it in the library. People would see our badges, people would come up and ask about how we were doing in the debate, and they'd talk to us, they'd ask us questions. And often there'd be a lot more of other people around us listening to the discussion. And it was always a great feeling. You'd talk to someone about it and point them in the right direction, and they'd go and they'd look at both sides of the debate and then come back and say, yeah, is there any chance I can have one of those yes badges? Yeah, absolutely, no worries. So for roughly 5 months now at Larbert High, there's been a growing group of students who are actively campaigning in the school, online, and alongside Yes Falkirk. And through Yes Falkirk again, we've made contact with people who are doing a similar job in a lot of the high schools in the district. We've also been campaigning at the Falkirk Steeple. And well, before the new year, we were getting a lot, there was the older voters there who, they'd come along and they'd ask, but we'd never really noticed the difference. But there's been a noticeable increase in the amount of young voters approaching the stall since we've started there. So I'm not sure if that's all down to us, but it might be. I'll finish on a couple of key points about the campaign. In the papers, on TV, and in the social media, the opponents of a yes vote are more than happy to portray the campaign as being all about Alex Salmond, right? The headlines they'll replace Yes Scotland or the Yes campaign with Alex Salmond's name. This referendum is not about any one political party. I'm voting yes because I think Scotland will be fairer and better governed after independence, because we'll be able to make all of our own choices. Secondly, I think it's strange how yes voters are described as separatists. In the age of the internet, the Scottish people have been more connected than ever. Young people like myself use social networking like Facebook and Twitter, and we can talk to people from all over the world. And every Sunday, my grandparents have video chats with my uncle, who are astonished that he's appearing live from Texas. We're not separate, and we certainly won't be separate after independence. Thank you very much for listening.
Good evening everyone. I'd just like to thank Yes Falkirk for inviting me, and for you all for coming here tonight. I think it's absolutely fantastic that someone like Connor is getting involved in the campaign, and we need to see more young people getting involved. I bet you didn't know, Connor, that you had something in common with Alistair Darwin, because he wasn't very good at maths either. So. Before I get started for I'd actually like to pay tribute to Bob Crow, the RMT General Secretary, who died today. A very great trade union leader and a Labour stalwart, and the trade union movement will be sorely missed within that. So, as Conor touched there, just at the very end, there are some myths in this campaign. It is all about Alexander, it is all about the SNP. This campaign and this movement, and that's what it's become, a movement, isn't a nationalist issue, certainly not for me. It's about 2 points. It's about democracy, and it's about what kind of society we want to be a part of. And Fiona and Sarah Jane both touched on the democracy. In the last general election for Westminster, the parties that voted third and fourth are the coalition that has determined our economic policy, our welfare policy, our defence and our foreign policy. Imagine if we were a Middle Eastern country or a Latin American country opposed to American imperialism. They'd find weapons of mass destruction in our country and use that as an excuse for the democracy, because that is what this is. This is a huge democratic deficit in this country, and it needs to be fixed. But I'm most interested in how we can change our society for the better. That's why I became a Labour member. That's why I've been a Labour supporter my whole life. Scotland are in the midst of a humanitarian crisis. That's not the SNP's words, that's not Yes Scotland's words, that's Scotland's Outlook campaign, a group of charities. And all the while, as we are in the midst of a humanitarian crisis, RBS announced losses of £8.2 billion and pay £455 million in bonuses. I don't know about you, but that's sickening. And it's equally sickening when RBS are saying that they might have to leave Scotland because we couldn't stand independence. Well, go. But before we go, just remember we own part of you, so give us our money back first. Because all the while this is going on, it's the poorest who are paying with the austerity measures that are going on from Westminster. These are hitting the poorest people in this country and the rest of the United Kingdom the hardest. And the worrying fact for me is that until 2015, we are only seeing 10 pence out of the pound that is going to be cut. That means another 90 pence in every pound of austerity is still to happen after this referendum and after the 2015 general elections. Sometimes when I think of bankers and people on benefits, it always makes me think of the Daily Mail, and I heard this, that the Daily Mail reader and a banker, and a person on benefits was eating a 12-pack of biscuits, and the banker took 11 of the biscuits and he whispered in the Daily Mail reader's ear, "Watch out, he's trying to steal your biscuit." And that's what's going on, that's what's happening today. But it's not the immigrants and the layabouts that the Daily Mail are claiming that's being hurt. It's not them at all, it's the working poor. Those people and those families who are out working 35, 40 hours a week and still having to rely on benefits which are being cut to put food on their tables. We've mentioned some statistics, so I'd like to give you another couple. We are the fourth most unequal society in the Western world as part of the United Kingdom. 1 in 4 children in Scotland are living in poverty. That's shocking. That's disgraceful. And it's a statistic, but it's not just a thing on a piece of paper. This is happening in each and every town and city in Scotland. As Conor said, look about you. Are you not seeing it in your own towns? Because that's the reality of being a part of this United Kingdom. The Red Cross are sending in food parcels to Scotland in peacetime. The Scotland is the 8th richest country per capita in the Western world. Now, I'm speaking here, and the reason I've been asked to speak here is because I'm a Labour member and I began Labour for Independence. And a lot of my Labour colleagues, and actually a decreasing number of my Labour colleagues, are arguing all we need is for Labour to win in 2015 and everything's going to be okay again. I heard that before. My parents heard that before. In 1997. But let's look about what's going to happen if a Labour government gets elected. Ed Miliband has said, there is no future for Labour in not being a party of the middle class. We've got ministers like Chris Bryant, who are saying that it's Tesco's fault that people aren't in work because they're hiring immigrants at cheaper rates. More austerity. Ed Balls has pledged he will continue the austerity cuts by the Conservative Lib Dem coalition. And Vern Corker has said that we will renew Trident. Another £25 billion down the Swanee when we could be spending it on our children, our hospitals and our education service. A vote for yes in 2014 referendum should be followed by a yes vote for Labour in 2016. But not the Joanne Lamont simply for nothing Labour. A real Scottish Labour Party. Removed from the shackles of Westminster Labour, which is moving us further and further to the right. We can go back to being the party of the people of Scotland. I'm not here to campaign for anybody else. I'm here to campaign for Scotland and my children. But I want to see a Scottish Labour government getting rid of that unlawful veteran tax. I think we're agreed on that. To start rebuilding social housing, giving people affordable homes. I want to see Scotland's equity put back into Scotland's hands. I want to see a real Labour Party in 2016, sticking up for the worker, by removing the anti-trade union laws passed in Westminster. I want to see people being incentivised to work, not by being given a salary like a minimum wage, or, as Westminster are terming, a living wage of about £7 an hour, a real living wage, so that people who work and families who work will never have to rely on state benefits to put food on their kids' table. I want to see an end to PFIs, a renationalisation, as Fiona mentioned earlier, of the Royal Mail. I want a nation that cares for all of its citizens, not a nation that's not predisposition to make choices predisposed to make choices, a something for nothing society. That's your choice. Unfortunately for me, I don't hold much trust in a Westminster Labour Party anymore. And I don't hold much trust in the current Scottish Labour leadership. But I know for a fact that I'm not alone in this. There are so many people in the Labour Party who want to see a real Scottish Labour again, who want to see us fighting for the people that Allan was talking about, Sarah Jane was talking about, back to fighting for working class people, back to fighting for the reasons that the party was invented: equality, fairness, social justice, looking after the poor, looking after the elderly, giving a helping hand to people who need it. That's the choice you can make on September 18th. Vote yes, and it can be possible. Vote no, and look forward to more and more austerity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you feel that all of our speakers have given you some food for thought. They all come at this particular debate from a different perspective as to why they believe that Scotland should vote yes. Some from a political perspective, some from a cultural perspective, personal, business, whatever it may be. So I think it demonstrates one of the things that I believe is a real get to the yes campaign, and that is the wide range of Scottish society that have become engaged in that process in supporting a yes vote